All right, we're fast approaching the 5th anniversary of BKFC 1, and very excited to be talking to someone who was a key fixture on that event and has gone on to have a great career since then and still actively creating new chapters in a great story. Always great getting to talk to this individual as well. I'm talking to Reggie Barnett Jr. How's your day going there, man?
Hey, man, it's been a little stormy, a little wet out here, but, every day above ground is a great day.
And one of the first questions that I've been posing to a lot of the people that I've spoken to for this project, like, what were your, first set of thoughts when a bare knuckle boxing offer came your way in mid-2018? Because, prior to that, there had been obviously some activity in the UK with BKB, but it had been quite a while domestically in America since something transpired. So what were your first thoughts when you got that offer to take part in BKFC 1?
Well, when I went to the tryout, I knew hands down that I was one of the best fighters there. I already knew that. It was just a matter of, would it actually happen? Would Dave finally get that go-ahead to have an actual bare-knuckle event? And when we got that call that it was going down in Miami, I was like, damn right, it's go time.
Yeah, for sure. And, what was your awareness of it prior to that point? Like, you talk about, the tryouts and things of that nature. Like, what did you know about the sport prior to, the summer of 2018 there?
I didn't know what I was getting into, man. I just knew that I was going to prepare myself in any way, shape, form possible for whatever was to come.
Yeah, for sure. And, we were, kind of talking about, the longevity just a bit ago, or rather the period of dormancy with the sport. Like, it had been a bit over a century since a bare knuckle event happened in North America, and that whole thing seemed to, be of huge importance to you, just in terms of a legacy move and the chance to make history, and how it kind of, tied in with your dad as far as that namesake attachment to the whole thing. So can you speak to that, I guess, just kind of being part of the history element and everything?
Yeah, it was really important to me to be a part of history. When I initially started this journey, I told my dad, when I was like, Dad, I'm going to go do bare knuckle. And he was like, what? I was like, Dad, I'm going to be a part of history. Our name will forever go down in, sports and combat history. And here we are, almost 5 years removed. And I am the only fighter from the original tryout who's still currently active and a current BKFC champion, like I knew I would be when I started this.
Yeah, for sure. And it seemed like, Wyoming and everything like that really, played a key role. Like, obviously I'm kind of speaking a bit after the initial event, but it really seemed to, be an important area as far as the sport having a place to kind of grow and thrive. Can you, I guess, speak to the importance of Wyoming as far as the, domestic growth of, bare knuckle fighting in the last number of years?
Yeah, Wyoming helped kick open the door for everything. Look at it. Just this year, I kicked open the door here in my home state. It needed to start somewhere. I'm grateful that Cheyenne was where it began. And that moment, that first knuckle up, if you go back and you watch that fight between me and Travis Thompson, that first knuckle up set the tone for my life for the next 5 years. I'm coming off that line hard every time.
And I'm kind of curious as far as just the general temperament with everything on the actual fight day. You were kind of talking a bit before about, you're preparing obviously, but you don't necessarily know what to expect in certain regards, being that it's the inaugural event and whatnot. So I guess, can you speak to the individual mindset as you were kind of, stepping to the arena that day, and then also what was the, I guess, general atmosphere from what you could tell among the other fighters backstage?
The best way I could describe this is, me and one of my trainers at the time were sitting in the dressing room, and he goes, yo, that's Johnny Bedford. And I was like, who? And he was like, that's Johnny Bedford. He was on Tough. And I was like, I have no idea who that is. And then I looked at Johnny. Johnny looked at me, and, we gave each other that mutual head nod. And I looked back at my coach and I said, I'm going to fight him. I said, me and him are going to fight for the world title. I knew that first time, it was all written, I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that no matter what came my way, I was going to make sure that I was prepared for and ready for to the best of my ability, whatever I had to deal with, inside that squared circle or outside.
And I'm curious, did that perception come from, I guess, the quality of his win over Nick Mamalis that night? Like, why did you, I guess, see the path being yourself versus him for a championship eventually?
Just who we were, the way we both carried it. Like, and you see it from Johnny's career, ready for whatever, whoever, whenever. It's just certain alphas, certain fighters, you read that from. And I have the utmost respect for Johnny. And it was that, knowing that mentality from the very first one, that set the tone for everything else to happen. Like I said, it's not my path that I'm following. I'm just doing my best to not stumble through it every time. But it's God's path that's laid before me.
And something that I thought was kind of an interesting anecdote when I was speaking to Johnny Bedford the other day. I mean, you talk about respecting him. The mutual respect very much was resonant when I was speaking to him, and he was talking about how kind of like after the event that him and yourself were kind of advocating to, David Feldman, the benefits of having a, bantamweight tournament following the heavyweight tournament that transpired at BKFC 1. So it's kind of a cool thing because you guys are obviously tied together in terms of you fought a pair of times for, championship gold, but also like really working together to kind of like lift the weight division up in general. So love to see it.
Yeah, we like, as soon as that first event was over, we're like, yo, we need a tournament. We need a tournament. Put us on opposite sides. We need a tournament. Like we do. And win, lose, or draw, those were two of the greatest fights of my life. Those were two of the greatest moments of my life. And the rest from it has only made me stronger and a better fighter, educated in. It's either a loss or a learning lesson. Taking everything that's happened when you draw inside the squared circle and turn it into a learning lesson.
Yeah, well said, and I thought that was a cool anecdote, so appreciate you, giving some insights on your end to kind of flesh that out too. But we've been talking about, like, you taking part in the tryouts and stuff like that. Like, I'm kind of curious because obviously you very much lived up to that educated hands moniker whereby seemingly fight to fight your IQ within this sport grows. But what was, like, the inaugural camp like for bare knuckle? Like, what was the first camp kind of like? So obviously you came from a gloved boxing background. Was it a bit of a unique camp for that first, go around with BKFC 1 and everything?
That first camp, we just prepared for any and everything. Body, mind, spirit, emotional, just whatever we could do to push myself to be ready for whatever was going to happen, because we didn't know. And the funniest thing is, both my closest training partners left our last bare knuckle sparring session for the first camp with matching black eyes. And my brother Trevor, who was one who was like, bro, I will never do that with you again, ever. And here we are 11 fights in, and he stood by that. He will not bare knuckle spar with me because he knows that when it's getting close to fight time, it's just a whole different animal, because that's just how I honed myself to be.
Yeah, and what was it like in the actual fight, landing like that first bare knuckle punch and stuff like that? Was it kind of a unique sensation when you landed that first strike in that fight?
Oh man, I fell in love with it. That first off the line, bing, bing. I dropped Travis off the line, in case nobody, they never caught that or got credit for it. But that first knuckle up, like I said, changed my life. One of the best moments ever, and I knew I was where I needed to be and where I wanted to be. That first bing, bing, 1-2 off the line set the tone for everything.
Yeah, and I mean, a pretty comprehensive performance. I mean, you mentioned just getting to it right off the rip, but also like a sustained quality performance over the distance, and against a guy who went on to have a great bare knuckle career in his own right, has definitely done some great things. So like, what were, I guess, the main takeaways / assessments from that one? Because it seemed like a pretty comprehensive effort the first time out.
I was still learning to, especially that first fight. I broke both my hands It was either the second or third round. It was uppercut hook, left uppercut, right hook. And so I had to learn, how to throw punches, where to throw punches. In that first fight, I just kind of went out there with a boxer, and I was like, I'm going to let these things go. But as time has gone on, I feel like, and I stand on it, we have great fighters in this league, and other great champions. But when you look at the aspect of a true bare-knuckle fighter, what a real, all-encompassing, well-rounded, tactical bare-knuckle fighter is, I am the best one on the planet. That's how I feel right.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about before about like the connection with your dad and like speaking to like the fact that you're going to interweave yourself into bare knuckle fighting, and it seems like you're a guy that kind of looks at it in a couple different regards, like, and as far as like it's a thing that has growth potential in the future, but also like the rich history behind it with guys like James Kelly, Jonathan Smith, John L. Sullivan, Jake Kilrain, etc. Can you talk about the, I guess, historical aspects of it, just kind of like interweaving yourself into something that's very much new and going forward in a certain regard? But yeah,
some of the greatest historic bare knuckle fighters, they made bare knuckle into their sport. How it worked for them, how it shaped out for them. But it was still great fights, exciting, and those are the best bare knuckle fighters in history. And I feel like as long as I continue on the path that I am, I will be up there when all is said and done in 100 years, mentioned with some of those names of the past, and living up to the greatness that they did. I still want to do some of the things that they did. They fought till somebody got knocked down in the end round. I would love to have a bare knuckle fight like that. It's just, I wanted my name to be solidified amongst one of the greatest bare knuckle fighters that lived, whether it's of my generation, future generations, and definitely past generations.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe this comparison won't necessarily resonate with you as much. Like just before talking about like not necessarily knowing Johnny Bedford was on The Ultimate Fighter at one point, but I feel like a few people I've spoken to have kind of likened that first event to kind of being similar to like the first UFC in a certain regard, and even in like a few years after in a certain extent, just as far as like it's this like attention grabbing new thing. There's a lot of curiosity around it, and obviously the growth very much was there with that sport. Do you kind of get what people are saying in that kind of regard? Like, what do you think about, I guess, that comparison?
Yeah, somebody told me, man, who was, he said, you are the, man, I can't think of the fighter he compared me to. Royce Gracie, I guess, of the BKFC. He said you were there at the beginning, He said, like the first UFC, you were there at the first BKFC. I guess it's I can't remember who he compared me to. And he's absolutely right. I am one of the forefathers of this sport. And I get to share that with some great people, some great men that, and women that are tremendous fighters and athletes. And no matter what, we have that time in history that we made the world stand still to see what the hell we were getting into.
And obviously you had a great performance, as we're talking about, and I mean certain fighters I've talked to, like maybe this question doesn't resonate as much because they're almost so squarely focused on their individual task, they don't really like, I guess, meaningfully take in some of the other action. But just curious to get your thoughts on maybe some of the fights from that night that struck you as memorable, or you have.
You can't say that the Lopez Beltran fight freaking phenomenal if you're talking about the first of a sport opening or whatever. To have a fight like that, that resonates. That's just a prelude of what's to come. The knockout, Eric Prindle knocking out, or was it Shoemaker knocking out Prindle? Got this giant hulk of a guy getting knocked out by the hillbilly hammer. That's like any man in there could get in there and throw them. I mean, who else? I gotta go back. It was an honor to fight on the card with Bobby Gunn. Just to spend some time with him. He's one of my idols growing. I went places and talk to people in the underground boxing world just to get, I guess, my own information on him that other people don't generally have. So to fight on the same card with him was absolutely amazing. I can't remember all the fights that were on the card, but, man, there were quite a few there that were just, like I said, it was a prelude for the greatness to come, the scraps that you see now. It just... And then Paulie Malignaggi told me himself that if he hadn't seen me fight Travis on that first card, he would have never had the gumption to get in there and fight. So I brought a world-class world champion to Bare Knuckle because of my performance.
Yeah, I feel like you've had that effect. I mean, I feel like you kind of had that effect on DeMarcus Corley as well before you threw down with Chop Chop there. So love to see it, especially considering your Queensbury rules background before BKFC came about.
Well, I mean, I did quite a bit of MMA and never officially kickboxed or Muay Thai, but I'm versed in what I like to call hand-to-hand combat. My approach to this whole bare knuckle thing has always been not just a boxing match without gloves. It's been, this is my hands versus your hands. This is hand-to-hand combat. And that was how I carried that first fight in itself. And it was a lot different than some of the other fighters who went out there and won fight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaks to the multiplicity of your combat sports experience, as you're saying. And yeah, I mean, it was kind of cool that you mentioned the Beltran and Lopez fight, because obviously it was a classic fight for the sport. But just having talked to both of those guys, like, it was just a cool kind of backstory, just in the sense of it was like the reserve bout for the heavyweight tournament, and then it ended up becoming like such a huge kind of emphatic fight. Like, I felt like it was one of the early kind of fights that got shared a lot on social media and stuff like that. And I think you could probably appreciate the element of them sort of being in that position of like the reserve bout almost, and then they kind of just like really assert themselves in like a almost like grassroots kind of way. Like, I feel like your career growth has been also very grassroots, and as far as like how you've achieved everything from the ground up and now being a reigning champion and all.
Hey, I always say, I told and I tell Dave Bowman all the time, thanks for giving this nobody from Chesapeake, Virginia, a shot at being Chesapeake, Virginia, a shot at being somebody. And I never set out in this league to be rich or famous or popular or anything. I wanted to take care of my family. Fighting has been my life and what I've always been good at. And so when I was given the opportunity to go out there and shine and do what I love to do and inspire others to go chase their dreams, knowing that I went through some of the lowest of the low points in my life, and with hard work, dedication, and faith, can go out there and live at a high point.
Yeah, I love to hear that, man. It's been a great journey to follow, and like I was saying before, a lot more in the journey, but something that we were talking about even the first time we spoke, like you were mentioning how you broke both of your hands during the first BKFC fight. Can you, I guess, talk about that aspect of it? Because I have talked to certain fighters that, took part of BKFC 1, and I was asking, like, some of the initial, I guess, physical feelings post-fight. Like, when, I guess, in the vacuum of the fight, did you realize that, both of your hands had been broken, or did you more find it out after?
The fourth round, when he was like, he poked me in the eye again, I was like, I really think I did that time because I can't keep my hands closed even though I'm trying to. And then just, even after the fight, you looked at my hands and the doctor over there looking at them, and they looked like freaking two giant pillows. And then just, even though I didn't get hit a lot, I did get hit in that fight. So you don't feel it then, but then the next day you feel it, and it's like, damn, where did this ache come from? Yeah. A bare knuckle strike feels completely different from any strike in the world.
And maybe it's a nebulous thing to try to describe, but like, how does it, I guess, feel different than some of the other sports you've been in?
I always tell people a good boxing punch can pierce your soul, but a solid bare knuckle strike can take a slice out your life. That is the best way I can put it.
I mean, it's a very powerful way to describe it, and well said for sure. And I mean, we were talking before about the growth that has happened since then. Like, we touched on your pair of, Bedford fights that were so influential to the division. Obviously, you cementing yourself as a champion later on, and, bringing BKFC to Virginia. Can you speak to, I guess, the growth that's happened in the bare knuckle scene nowadays as we're 5 years out from that night, June 2nd, 2018 in Wyoming?
Man, growth. Dave says the fastest growing sport in combat sport, however his spiel goes, and I'm like, I'm not only am I going to evolve this sport in the essence of technique or whatever, I'm doing some of the work that Dave had to do himself. I opened up a whole new state and poised to open up another one. Help open up another state. So it's growing the sport, not just within the bounds of getting there and fighting people, but also helping my sport. What I believed in as much as Dave believed in. I just happened to be the one getting there before me, helping it grow in all aspects.
Yeah, for sure, and that's definitely been evident all throughout your journey. Like, very much you seem there for the sport and its growth as you individually grow in your efforts. But, it's always great getting to talk to you, man. I appreciate you being part of this project and everything, but just in being mindful of your time and general schedule, is there maybe any final parting thought you might want to add as we're kind of wrapping up here, 5 years out from BKFC 1?
Really, I'm not done. There's more work to do. And by the time I'm done, there's not going to be a bare knuckle event or fight held anywhere in the world where they won't have to mention educated hands.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly well on your way to achieving that and everything like that. I mean, you've had a great run so far, and like I said, very much excited to, see what the subsequent next steps are and everything like that. But to reiterate, appreciate you taking part of this project and everything like that, or taking part in this project, rather. You were definitely someone that stood out to me when I wanted to do this, 5-year anniversary retrospective of BKFC 1, and great insights given as always. So thanks so much, man, and yeah, you enjoy the rest of your day too, Reggie.
Dylan, thank you so much for having me on. And look, 5 years ain't nothing. I got another 5 more in me.
We'll do the BKFC 1 decade recap then. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, you have a great afternoon, man. Thank you again so much for the consideration and having me on.